Brooke Carol Wilberger was born on February 20th, 1985, in Fresno, California. She was the fifth of 6 children in a loving, close-knit Mormon family that eventually put down roots near Eugene, Oregon. Brooke stood out in just about every way. She was bright, athletic, and had a kind, easygoing nature. She had a soft spot for animals, shined in 4-H, and threw herself into sports, basketball, soccer, and track. If it involved teamwork or determination, Brooke was all in. By 16, she had started dating a childhood friend named Justin Blake. Their bond ran deep, the kind where everyone assumed they'd end up together. Even after high school, they stuck it out long distance, and Brooke later followed Justin to Brigham Young University in Utah. She had a clear vision for her future, majoring in speech pathology and hoping to help others through communication. Everything in her life felt like it was heading somewhere good. In May 2004, after finishing her freshman year at BYU, Brooke came back home to Oregon for the summer. Her older sister, Stephanie, managed the Oak Park apartments in Corvallis, just a few blocks from Oregon State University, and got Brooke a part-time job helping with maintenance and office tasks around the complex. On the morning of May 24th, Brooke was seen just after 10 a.m. outside the apartments, carrying a bucket of water to clean some light fixtures. It was routine stuff. She was planning to meet Stephanie for lunch that day, but she never showed up. When Stephanie stepped outside to check, she saw the bucket still sitting near a post, Brooke's flip-flops broken and tossed aside on the pavement. It was obvious something wasn't right. It looked like there had been a struggle. At 3:07 p.m., Stephanie's husband called 911 to report Brooke missing. Her purse, keys, wallet, phone, everything was still inside the apartment. A neighbor reported hearing a woman scream around 10:30 a.m., but no one saw what happened. Brooke had vanished in broad daylight. The timing couldn't have been worse. Justin was in Venezuela at the time, serving a 2-year Mormon mission. He had no way of knowing that his girlfriend had just disappeared. Search efforts launched almost immediately. Local police, FBI, and hundreds of volunteers canvassed the area. The Corvallis Police Department went door to door. Law enforcement interviewed more than 400 registered sex offenders within a 20-mile radius and checked more than 2,200 across the state. The community held out hope, but as the weeks dragged on, every lead fizzled out. There were even strange moments, like the arrest of a man with a massive stash of stolen women's underwear, but no connection to Brooke. Nothing panned out. Then 10 months later, and 1,300 miles away, a break came out of nowhere. In Albuquerque, New Mexico, a foreign exchange student from Russia was abducted at knife point. Her attacker tied her up using her shoelaces, shoved her into a red compact car, and drove off. But when he stepped out of the vehicle for a moment, she saw her chance and ran. That brave escape led to a detailed description of the car: red seat covers with flower prints, a stuffed animal on the dashboard, and a general sense that the interior had been personalized in a very specific way. Police traced the vehicle and soon arrested 38-year-old Joel Patrick Courtney. He was a married father of 3 with a disturbing past, prior arrest, drug problems, and a reputation for violence. His own sister later said that he had tried to sexually assault her when they were younger. He'd been in trouble for sexually abusing a minor and was once suspected of involvement in satanic rituals. Clearly, this wasn't his first act of violence. When police in New Mexico ran his background, they discovered Courtney had an active warrant for a DUI in Oregon. That was the moment everything shifted. When investigators in Oregon heard about the Albuquerque assault, the similarities to Brooke's case were undeniable. Both women had been grabbed in daylight, tied up with personal items, and stuffed into a car. Courtney had been in Oregon visiting family on the day Brooke disappeared. Phone records placed him in Corvallis that morning. He had borrowed a green Dodge Caravan from a relative. When investigators found that van and tested it, forensic results came back confirming Brooke's DNA and hair were inside. In 2005, Courtney was officially charged with Brooke's kidnapping and murder. He fought extradition for 3 years, but by 2008, he was finally returned to Oregon to stand trial. The evidence was overwhelming. In 2009, he agreed to plead guilty to aggravated murder in exchange for avoiding the death penalty. As part of the plea deal, Courtney finally admitted what he had done to Brooke. He confessed to abducting her at knife point while she was working outside, binding her with duct tape and forcing her into the van. He drove her into the mountains and left her inside the vehicle overnight while he returned to Corvallis to get food. The next morning, when she fought back, he sexually assaulted her and then bludgeoned her to death. Courtney led authorities to a remote, overgrown logging road in the Oregon Coast Range between Blodgett and Wren. There, they found Brooke's remains. She was identified through dental records and by a small silver watch her mother had given her the Christmas before, still on her wrist. Investigators would later uncover that Courtney had tried to abduct at least 2 other women from the Oregon State University campus the same day he took Brooke. He was relentless, and he never once expressed any remorse. As part of the agreement with prosecutors, Oregon dropped the additional charges so the Wilberger family could recover Brooke's remains and give her a proper burial. Courtney was sentenced to life in prison without the possibility of parole. At his request, and with Oregon's consent, he was allowed to serve his sentence in New Mexico, where he remains behind bars. Deroshia Ann Pat Matthews was born on May 21, 1951, in Jackson, Mississippi, to James and Pinky Foster. She studied music and psychology at Jackson State University and later worked in tutoring and recreation programs. By her late 20s, she had moved to Omaha, Nebraska, where she became a teacher's aide and a crossing guard at Clifton Hill School. She also gave music lessons and worked for a time at the Omaha Girls Club. Her son, 7-year-old Kamal Matthews, was a second grader at Clifton Hill. He loved riding his bike, flipping through comic books, and delivering newspapers alongside his mom. They shared an Omaha World Herald paper route, just the 2 of them building a life together. Then came Tuesday morning, April 24, 1979, a day that started like any other in Omaha until everything changed. Pinky Foster hadn't heard from her daughter in over a day, and that wasn't like Deroshia at all. She was responsible, dependable, and fiercely devoted to Kamal. Pinky knew in her gut something was wrong. That morning, she gathered her niece Velma Strong, Velma's husband J.C., and a family friend named Mrs. Martin. They drove to Deroshia's house on Benny Street in the Clifton Hills neighborhood. A neighbor handed them a spare key. What they found inside would haunt them forever. The house looked ransacked, drawers pulled out, paper scattered everywhere, the front window open, and the television still on, glowing in the background. Then they saw him. Kamal was lying in one of the bedrooms, still in his pajamas. A rope had been wrapped tightly around his neck. He'd been strangled. They ran from the house to call police. When officers arrived and searched the home, the horror deepened. In the basement, they found Deroshia, partially clothed, lying on a waterbed. She had also been strangled and suffocated, and the coroner later confirmed she had been sexually assaulted. Mother and son brutally taken. The community was stunned. Just days earlier, Deroshia had left her job at the school. Kamal never made it to class that Monday. He didn't run the evening paper route. It had always been the 2 of them. His father lived in California, and now they were gone. Detectives soon had a name, Louis Walker. Deroshia had met him years earlier at a community event, but the evidence at the time wasn't strong enough, and no charges were filed. The case went cold, and for decades, the Matthews family was left with nothing but grief and questions. Then came 2004. Walker, who had by then changed his name to Abdul Malik Hussein, was arrested in Colorado on an unrelated charge. His DNA was entered into CODIS, the national DNA database, and it matched evidence collected from Deroshia's body. It should have been the moment justice began, but due to a clerical error in the prosecutor's office, the charges were dismissed. Just like that, the case slipped back into silence. Then in 2021, Omaha Police's cold case squad decided to try something new, something powerful. They used forensic genetic genealogy, a method that combines DNA with public family tree research. Bit by bit, they worked their way through the branches, and once again, they landed on the same man, Abdul Malik Hussein. Only this time, there were no mistakes. On February 12, 2025, nearly 46 years after Deroshia and Kamal were murdered, 67-year-old Abdul Malik Hussein was arrested and charged with their murders. Turns out he had stayed in the Omaha area for years. Court records show he still had an Omaha address as recently as 2019. For decades, he walked free, but science and the relentless determination of investigators finally caught up with him. As of now, Hussein remains held without bond in Douglas County. On March 21, 2025, he waived his preliminary hearing, clearing the path for the case to proceed directly to trial. While a specific trial date has not yet been announced, preparations are actively underway. Nothing can bring back Deroshia or Kamal. Nothing can fill the hole left by their loss. But after all these years, their story finally has a name, and their family has a shot at justice. It didn't come fast, but it came. Born in 1952, Diane Peterson was described as smart, kind, and dedicated to helping others. By 1978, at just 26 years old, she was working as an English teacher at Branham High School in San Jose, California. She wasn't there long, but she quickly earned the respect of her coworkers and trust of her students. Diane loved teaching, and it showed. But on June 16, 1978, just one day after the school year ended, Diane went back to her classroom to get things ready for the fall. That morning, a student found her lying on the floor near room 102 with a single stab wound to the chest. It was shocking. There were no signs of robbery, no indication of sexual assault, and nothing had been taken. Whoever did it, it was personal, and it happened in a place where students were supposed to feel safe. Police got to work quickly. Witnesses said they'd seen someone in the area, and a composite sketch was made. Not long after, one name started to stand out: 16-year-old Harry Nicky Nickerson. Just 4 days after the murder, he was arrested for something unrelated, but during questioning, he randomly accused the police of trying to blame him for Diane's murder. No one had even said anything about it yet. He denied killing Diane, denied having a knife, but years later, people remembered things differently. In 1983, the family of a student at Branham told police their son had witnessed the murder and said Nickerson was the killer. But when investigators followed up, the boy denied saying it. Then in 1984, another witness came forward and said Nickerson had confessed, claiming Diane caught him dealing drugs, and he snapped. That same year, someone else claimed Nickerson used to carry a knife with Teacher Deer engraved on it. It was disturbing, but nothing could be confirmed, and the case went cold. Meanwhile, Nickerson kept getting in trouble. He was convicted of kidnapping, armed robbery, and assault with a deadly weapon. In 1984, he was seriously hurt during a drug-related robbery. Then in 1993, he took his own life at the age of 31, and any truth he might have told died with him. But Diane wasn't forgotten. Her family, her students, and the Santa Clara County Cold Case Unit kept hoping answers would come someday. Between 2023 and 2024, investigators gave it another shot. They tested all the old evidence using new DNA technology, but no hits came back. Then in 2025, a relative of Nickerson's came forward. They said that on the morning of Diane's murder, Nickerson came home just minutes after it happened and admitted to stabbing a teacher. For decades, this person stayed silent, but nearly 47 years later, they finally told the truth. That statement changed everything. Investigators looked at the old composite sketch, the early witness tips, Nickerson's criminal history, and his strange behavior after the murder, and it all lined up. On May 31, 2025, the Santa Clara County District Attorney's Office officially named Harry Nicky Nickerson as the person responsible for killing Diane Peterson. Nickerson was never arrested or tried, and he'll never face justice in court. But after all these years, her family and former students finally got an answer. It didn't fix what happened, but at least it brought some closure. Phyllis Jean Baylor, known to everyone who loved her as Jeanie, was born on July 13, 1945, in Bluffton, Indiana, to George and Leona Miller. She grew up surrounded by a tight-knit family and was known for being kind, dependable, and full of warmth. In 1966, at just 20 years old, Jeanie married Richard Baylor in her hometown. A few years later, they welcomed a daughter, and by the early 1970s, the young family was settling into life in Indianapolis. On the evening of July 7, 1972, Jeanie was heading out with her 3-year-old daughter for a visit to her parents back in Bluffton. It was a trip she'd made before, just over 100 miles. Nothing unusual. She left Indianapolis around 8 p.m., driving a borrowed car, likely expecting a late but safe arrival, but she never made it. The next morning, around 10:30 a.m., the car was found abandoned on northbound I-69 in Grant County. The hood was up, like maybe she'd had some engine trouble. Just an hour later, and nearly 40 miles away, a passing driver on West Road in Allen County spotted something off on the side of the road. It was Jeanie. She was lying in a ditch, her body lifeless. But her daughter, just 3 years old, was right there beside her. She had somehow survived the night, alone, beside her murdered mother. An autopsy confirmed what investigators feared. Jeanie had been sexually assaulted and shot once in the head. The scene raised more questions than answers. No robbery, no one saw anything, and without today's forensic tools, the case stalled quickly. Leads dried up, and the case went cold. But Jeanie wasn't forgotten. Over the years, investigators revisited her case, hoping that science would catch up. At one point, a partial DNA profile was pulled from her clothing. It wasn't enough to find her killer, but it was enough to eliminate the main suspect they had been focused on for decades. That setback was devastating, but it also kept the case alive. Then, in 2024, over 50 years after Jeannie's murder, investigators got the break they'd been waiting for. The Indiana State Police Laboratory was able to extract a more complete DNA profile from the same evidence. With that, detectives partnered with Identifinders International, a group that specializes in forensic genetic genealogy. That decision changed everything. In early 2025, they helped identify the man responsible, Fred Allen Lineman. At the time Jeanie was killed, Lineman was 25 and living in Grosse Pointe, Michigan. He'd been born in Anderson, Indiana, only about 40 miles from Indianapolis, and had a criminal history that included car theft. But there was no known connection between him and Jeanie. It appears their paths may have crossed by chance, a random, violent encounter with devastating consequences. But the justice her family deserved never came in the way they hoped. When investigators dug into Lineman's background, they discovered he'd been murdered himself in Detroit back in 1985. According to the Detroit News, he was beaten with a baseball bat by 2 men, tossed into a dumpster, and the dumpster was then set on fire. He was 37. So while Jeannie's killer was finally identified, he had died nearly 40 years earlier. He was never questioned, never arrested, never tried. Still, after more than half a century of wondering, her family finally has answers. Sherry Ann Coleman was born on July 3, 1977, in Berwyn, Illinois, to Donald Weiss and Angela DeChico. She served in the U.S. Air Force before becoming a full-time mom and wife. She married Christopher Coleman in 1997 in Chicago. At age 20, she was pregnant with their first son. Garrett was born in 1998. Gavin followed in 2000, and they eventually moved into a 2-story house in Columbia, Illinois, not far from St. Louis. Sherry left the military to raise the boys and became deeply involved in church. She loved her kids, supported her husband, and by all accounts, was a warm, patient, and deeply committed mom. Chris, meanwhile, had served in the Marine Corps. He was raised in a strict religious household. His parents, Ron and Connie Coleman, were prominent pastors in Monroe County. After leaving the military, Chris landed a high-paying job as Joyce Meyer's personal bodyguard. He was making good money, over 6 figures, and they had the kind of life people on the outside saw as picture perfect. But inside that house, it was a different story. In late 2008, Chris claimed he started getting threats, first through emails sent to Joyce Meyer Ministries, then through letters sent to their house. The messages were strange, someone allegedly furious at Chris for working for Joyce Meyer, threatening to kill his family if he didn't quit. One said, "Your family is dead," and another, "I am always watching." It was enough to get the police involved. Detective Justin Barlow, who happened to live behind the Colemans, installed a surveillance camera aimed at their mailbox, but there was never any footage of someone delivering the threats. Nothing suspicious ever showed up. Meanwhile, Sherry told her friends something wasn't right. Chris had grown cold, distant. She believed he was cheating, and she was scared. One of her friends later said Sherry told her, "If something happens to me, Chris did it." On the morning of May 5th, 2009, Chris left for the gym around 5:43 a.m. He said he tried texting and calling Sherry from the gym but got no answer. Then he called Detective Barlow and asked him to check on her. Police showed up at the house around 6:56 a.m. They found a basement window open, and when they got inside, it was like something out of a horror movie. Red spray-painted messages were scrawled on the walls. "You have paid," "I am always watching," and "punished." Then came the real horror. Sherry was found in her bed, naked under the covers, with a ligature mark around her neck. She had been strangled. There were signs that she may have fought back. Her autopsy later showed bruising on her upper arms and shoulders, consistent with someone holding her down. Garrett, just 11 years old, was found in his bed with similar bruises and a ligature mark around his neck. Spray paint had been used on his bed linens. 9-year-old Gavin was in his own bed, also strangled. Police found the words "F you" spray-painted across his white comforter in red paint. Both boys still had their arms tucked under their blankets, suggesting they were killed in their sleep, possibly before they even had a chance to wake up or react. Chris arrived back at the house around 7 a.m. and was kept outside. When officers told him his wife and kids were dead, he cried, but detectives immediately noticed something felt off. He never once asked how they died. He didn't demand answers. He didn't try to run inside. And officers noticed scratches on his arms that he had covered with makeup. From there, it all started unraveling. Autopsies showed they were likely killed between 3 and 5 a.m. before Chris left the house. A forensic analysis of Chris's laptop revealed he had created the email account that sent the threats. He had accessed it from his home computer. Investigators matched the handwriting on the spray paint to Chris's own samples. A receipt was found for the exact brand and color of red spray paint used at the scene. His phone records showed he took a strangely long route home that morning, likely to stall for time and appear unaware. Then came the biggest betrayal. Chris had been having a full-blown affair with a Florida woman named Tara Lentz, someone Sherry had once considered a friend. They exchanged hundreds of sexually explicit texts, photos, and even filmed a sex tape together on a trip to Hawaii. Chris promised Tara they'd be together soon. He gave her a promise ring, talked about having a daughter named Zoe, and said he planned to serve Sherry with divorce papers on May 4th or 5th. But instead of filing for divorce, he chose murder. Chris was arrested on May 19, 2009, and charged with 3 counts of first-degree murder. At trial, prosecutors laid everything out: the fabricated threats, the timeline, the receipts, the digital footprint, the affair. Joyce Meyer testified via video that Chris never told her about the affair and would have likely been fired if he had. Tara also testified. She claimed the relationship started in November 2008, but prosecutors showed photos from October, proving it started earlier and that Chris had lied. On May 5, 2011, exactly 2 years after the murders, he was convicted. The jury was ready to hand him the death penalty, but Chris waived his right to have them decide and left it to the judge. Judge Milton Wharton sentenced him to life in prison without parole. After the conviction, Sherry's family filed a civil suit against Chris, his father Ron, and Joyce Meyer Ministries. They claimed Chris forged Sherry's signature to transfer the house into his name, removed personal items from the house after the murders, and tried to erase her presence from their home. They also pushed to make sure no one profited from the crime. In 2012, Sherry, Garrett, and Gavin were exhumed and reburied near Sherry's family outside Chicago. Chris's parents tried to block it, but the court ruled that a convicted murderer shouldn't have the final say. The original headstone, paid for by Chris's parents, still stands in Chester, Illinois, but their graves are now empty. Chris still maintains his innocence. In a 2018 Crime Watch Daily interview, he claimed someone else sent the emails from a second laptop he left at home. His father, Pastor Ron Coleman, continues to defend him and even blamed Sherry, saying she wasn't submissive enough as a wife. Let's let that sink in.